Okay, so here I have the pattern sheet laid out on the board, not cut out yet, with the three pieces that your pattern says you need. Now I was sure to make sure I got the teen/adult pattern because that is the size you're going to be using most likely. There is another pattern in that pattern envelope that is for teen/child. So you want to make sure you get the right size. Now this pattern comes in 5 different sizes here. Okay, so you have an extra small cutting line, a small cutting line, a medium cutting line, large cutting line, and extra large cutting line. So you can do all of those sizes with this one pattern. So once you decide what size pattern you need to use, that is when you decide which cutting line that you're going to be using. Okay, for example, this is pattern piece 1. It is the front of your pajama pants. So if I needed to make the medium, for example, I'm going to want to cut on that medium line. So one thing, especially when you are beginning to start sewing, one thing that is helpful, and sometimes even if you're not a beginner, sometimes it is helpful to have a highlighter and actually highlight the line that you are going to be cutting on, because there's all kinds of different lines on these pattern pieces. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this medium, for example, all the way down. Oops, I'm kind of getting off my line. Okay, but that's the one I'm going to be cutting on. Okay, so I know that is my medium. Okay, over here, you already see I got some green on there, but we're going to ignore the green for now if I'm doing medium. Now from here to here is all the sizes, but when it splits off like here, that's when you have to split off to your medium size, and then you have to keep following it, you know, down to wherever you need it. Okay. So there's my pink highlighted line. Okay, you can see that the top is all one line up here. So that means all sizes cut on that line there. All right, so if you decided that you wanted to cut out the short shorts, that's another line that you're going to want to highlight because there are a lot of lines on here. You don't want to cut on this crotch line because then you're cutting off your shorts essentially. That is where your crotch is going to go. All right, so in this case, I would go ahead and keep highlighting the medium if I wanted to make the shorts. Okay, so I'm going to keep highlighting just this medium line here. Okay. Okay, so that is the cutting line for view C. That's what that says there. If you look at your pattern, view C right there. So if you decide you want the next length, the almost knee length, that would be view B. Okay, instead of highlighting this line here on the medium, you would just come straight down from here. Oops, and highlight that. Make sure you're highlighting the medium line. This is for view B. Okay, and then from here, you've got this little strange little angle here. So instead of angling out when you cut it, you would just come straight down from there for that. Okay, so if you were doing, you know, the knee length ones, you'd be highlighting that line instead and cutting on that line. And same for the very bottom line. Whoops, which is the longer length pants. So I'm not going to highlight that. You get the idea. Okay, so after you figure out what lines you've highlighted that, you would of course highlight your back piece. This piece right here is just a measurement guide for your elastic. You don't need that. If you're making these for yourself, you're going to use yourself as your measurement guide. You don't need that at all. Okay, so after you highlight the lines And again, if it's a solid line, that means you cut on it. If there's no different sizes, you cut right on that line. So what you're going to do from here is go ahead and cut out your pattern pieces using your fabric scissors. Okay, and you're going to cut right on that line, whichever line you highlighted, okay? So if you're doing the medium, you would cut right there on that highlighted line. Okay, all the way. And then when you get up to the solid line that doesn't have sizes, you cut on that one solid line. And the same thing here. Okay, and then you're going to do the same thing for the other pattern piece. So you should be cutting out 2 different pattern pieces at this time. Okay, so here are my 2 pieces cut out, my front and my back. Now I went ahead and did long pajamas. If you did the shorter ones, you would have cut it here. If you did the next shortest one, you would have cut it here. And I do recommend, if you did cut it off here for the short shorts, keep the rest of the pattern, because at some point somebody or you or whoever's going to use this pattern next might want to make the long pants. So it's always a good idea to keep, you know, those kind of remainders. Now I did cut mine on large, so this little extra large piece I cut off, there's no really reason to keep that, okay? Unless you just really think, yeah, I might want to use that again, tape it back on. But do keep, you know, the bottom parts if you use the shorts. Okay, the next thing you're going to want to do is lay out your fabric. Now it should already be folded and folded in half, and you should have these little factory edge finishes here. Anytime you see like this little fraying action, or it looks like it's some kind of finish here on the edge, that is called a selvage. And basically you want to have those 2 edges together, for at least for pajama pants. Sometimes that does change in your direction. So I have laid out my fabric. I have it doubled. Okay, so you want to have it doubled when you cut out your fabric. That way you get 2 pieces at the same time and you're guaranteed they're going to be the same size. Okay, so I've got my wrong sides together in this case. That's just the way this fabric came. Okay, so you got to fold over here and the opening over here. So you're going to want to lay that out, because we're going to put your pattern on top of your fabric to pin it. On your pattern, you will notice, you'll notice a lot of symbols, but one big one that jumps out right now that you're going to need is this long arrow. Runs all the way up a lot of the length of the pants here. Okay, so that is called a grain line arrow. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that that arrow is parallel to your selvage. Okay, and especially if you have some kind of print on here, you want to make sure that it is straight. Like I've got little cat heads on here, so if I went kind of crooked, then my cat heads are going to be crooked. So I do want to make sure that that arrow is lined up exactly to this edge. So when you get into class in person next year, you will see exactly how to measure that all out and everything. But that grain line right there should be parallel to that selvage right there. Also, if you do have a fabric that's got some kind of direction, okay, so I've got cat heads on mine. I want to make sure my cat heads aren't upside down. This is the top of my fabric, of my pattern, where my waist is. Down there is into my legs. I want to make sure my cat heads are always in the up position. Okay, so I wouldn't want the leg down here, otherwise my cats would be upside down. Okay, so I've laid that piece out. I'm going to lay the other piece out on the rest of my fabric down here. And at that point, I will go ahead and pin it. So most important thing, make sure that your grain line arrow is parallel to your selvage. So I don't have this pinned yet, but there is my one leg. My cat's heads are all up. Okay, there's the bottom of my pant leg. See, my cat heads are all facing the right direction. And then here is my other piece. This will be my back piece. Cat heads facing the correct direction again. Grain line arrows parallel to the edge of the fabric, the selvage of the fabric there. So I'm going to pin this down. Generally, I put about 1 pin every 4 inches about. Okay, and I just use my hand. You can use your hand to kind of measure that out as 4 inches. Okay, after you do that, we're going to do some cutting. But at this point, just go ahead and pin this out. and then I'm going to show you some tips on how to cut this out correctly. So when you are ready to cut out the actual fabric, I've got everything pinned down here. You want to make sure that you have your item flat on a flat surface, whether it is a table or the floor, depending on where you're working. When you cut out, you want to make sure that you have your scissors also, you know, flat down to the surface. You don't want to cut in the air like that. You're not going to get an accurate cut that way. Okay, so as I'm cutting down this one little area here, okay, when you get down to these little things here, these are called notches. This is how you match up your pattern pieces. It's kind of like the little puzzle pieces, and you match them together, and that way you know you're getting the right piece to the right piece. So when you get to these, it's important to cut them out so you can use them later. So what I'm going to do, zoom in a little bit, is simply, there's two here. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to just cut out a little bit, cut across, and cut down. Okay, let me show you what I've done. Okay, so I basically came up, just kind of mirroring the triangle here. I went down that way, and that gives me kind of the double triangle. There's no need to cut each little individual triangle. That indicates it's a big notch there, and I'll show you a single notch here in a moment. Move the camera down a little bit. Okay, so we're going to be coming up on a single notch here, so that's a little different. Okay, so I'm going to continue down this way. Again, I'm just cutting around the paper. Okay, so here I come to another notch right here. Okay, so I'm simply going to cut a little triangle. Okay, move my fabric out of the way so you can see what I've done there. Okay, so there's a little piece of a triangle here. So this eliminates the need to actually go back later and mark this with a pen. Mark this with a pen, meaning a writing instrument pen, not a straight pen. So it's just a faster way of marking your fabric. So you'll find these little notches in several places. Okay, so this is the inside leg here. This is down the front of your waist, going towards the crotch area. And then there should be one on the other side there. Okay, right there. So you're going to want to do this every time you see one of these little notches. Okay, now, yeah, usually you're going to have about 3. All right, so make sure as you're cutting out your pattern that you're just cutting right on the line, cutting down on a flat surface. If you have fabric shears, that's the best thing to use. Again, I do have this pinned, it's double fabric. Okay, my right sides are facing together. Excuse me, my wrong sides are facing together. You can also cut it out with your right sides facing together, that's not a problem. Okay, so I'm going to continue cutting this out, and then we will be ready to sew. Okay, so normally after you cut out a pattern, you would be marking it. There's not much to mark on the pajama pants. So this is my front, and it's really helpful to mark your front. These notches, eventually you will know, you know, that the 2 notches there mean front and so forth. Even though I know that, I still mark it because it's just easier to see and mark. So I have a water erasable pen here. If you have pencil, that's fine too, as long as you don't, you know, mark it on the, you know, the right side of the fabric. So this is my front piece here. So what I'm really going to just do is just a really little mark. I've already unpinned my pattern, so I just kind of folded it back. You want to keep your pattern pieces, the actual paper pieces, with your fabric pieces until you are ready to actually use that piece to sew. Okay, so I kind of peeled this back. I'm going to put an F right here, close to the edge of the fabric. Okay, on both sides there. Okay, so I open that up, and I just put an F there. Okay, that tells me it's the front. Okay, so basically what I did, my pattern piece, I've unpinned it. I just folded the pattern piece back. I opened up my two pieces to reveal the inside of the fabric. And then I just put an F there so I know that. So you want to do the same thing with the back. Okay, that's really all there is to mark on these pajama pants. And then you are ready to start sewing. That's pretty much the end of the cutting and the marking process.